for Kubernetes newbies, should you jump right into using Helm or Kustomize, or should you first kind of kick the tires on writing raw Kubernetes manifests? And similar to that, how do you get started? Like if you already have maybe lots of Docker compositions, should you do what Sheldon did? Maybe use Compose to translate those rapidly to something in Kubernetes that you can deploy. So my thought on this is you should always crawl before you walk a little bit. And this isn't saying that you're going to go live to production writing raw manifests, but I think it is really important to understand some of the fundamentals and how Kubernetes works as a framework before you start immediately jumping into optimization. Just like if you are learning Terraform, I totally support, and you should absolutely use Terraform modules, but I don't think you'll appreciate all the effort that goes into Terraform modules if you first don't just get the basics down and write a few of your own Terraform resources. It lowers the bar. You'll have more sense of satisfaction and accomplishment earlier. You won't be overwhelmed. And I can't help but say, like, a lot of people, when you start out with these things, is like, it's just adding complexity, or it's just adding indirection or layers, or adding more tools. And I get it. We've all said those words at some point. But it rubs me the wrong way always. Like, that's just because we don't always understand the steps and the thinking that got us there. So once you go through some hard lessons learned, some of those rudimentary parts, then you'll appreciate, now I understand why there's this Helm chart for Kubernetes, because I don't want to go write 500 resources and deploy and manage those manually. And I don't know anything actually about Prometheus low level, so I rather use this Helm chart that somebody else provided and is an expert at it. Just be advised that when you start using those Helm charts, they move pretty fast. Like Kubernetes, this is one reason why we don't use Prometheus anymore. Like it's like you get up and running really quickly, you're victorious within 5 minutes. Look, there, I deployed a full Kubernetes, Kubernetes cluster in no time. And then, like, if you're like us, we started when it was over at Ticketmaster, and the Ticketmaster gave it to CoreOS, and then CoreOS gave it to Kubernetes stable, or like, the github.com/helm/charts. But then that got deprecated. So then it got splintered out into, 10 different organizations that are all managing their own Helm charts. So just like with Terraform and modules, you kind of got to pick your vendors, and hopefully that vendor is pretty good at maintaining ongoing support for those. There's one company out there that provides an enormous ecosystem of Helm charts for like everything, from WordPress to Bitnami. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the Bitnami charts is one of those great ecosystem for Helm charts I recommend checking out. So next question, should you be writing Helm charts for your own company? There are 3 considerations here in making this decision. So I've assumed now you graduated from writing manifest, you understand why you want to dry things up. Now you need to figure out, how do you want to dry things up? So I think Helm is phenomenal as an open source distribution model for apps. And Helm basically lets you package up all the nastiness of deploying a Kubernetes resource and expose a simple interface that you just provide YAML values. Keep in mind that YAML values, there is no bona fide schema that spans organizations. Any developer can come up with any schema they want for your Helm chart. So this is one of the nastinesses that we get with Helm. So when it comes to deploying open source pieces, I think you should basically standardize on using Helm. That there's little room for negotiation if you talk to me about that. But if we're talking about deploying your company's apps, then I think there's a few ways this might go. And how you generate those manifests will be based on kind of what resonates with you. The 2 leading strategies that I see is mostly using Kustomize or Helm. All of our customers are currently using Helm still, but I see what's nice with Kustomize is what you are templating looks a whole lot more like the final product and doesn't do text file based templating on YAML data, on YAML data structures, which has always been kind of awkward. But the reason why the community went that way was that you could at least visually kind of see what that YAML would look like, versus if it was a data, like if it was a DSL for generating your YAML. It's elegant from a programmatic standpoint, and it's impossible from a community standpoint, like conveying how to use that DSL when it never will look like what the documentation from that vendor said. So that's my point there. So the last thing I wanted to say is keep in mind what you want your continuous delivery model to look like for Kubernetes. Because if you're going to go with tools like Flux or Argo CD, one of the end results there is you're actually reducing it all down to the raw manifests themselves. So the tool choice matters a little bit less. And the outcome is you're defining the state of your resources in a Git repository, however you want to do that. I still think that using Helm to generate those manifests is a great solution, and committing that, or using Kustomize or some other solution. So I'll stop there. Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've really called out, from my perspective, like the key underpinning to making that choice of how you're going to templatize and to what degree you're going to templatize your Kubernetes manifest. It really comes down to how many variables do you have, right? Like if you're talking about an open source project that a bunch of people are going to be using to install your stuff, you have to account for all those variables and how they're going to consume it.
That's true.
So that means Helm chart, right? But if it's just your company and you're deploying it to 1, 2, maybe 3 environments, and your variables are much less, maybe you're changing a name here or there, maybe you're changing a subnet group or something, then maybe you don't need the complexity of the Helm chart. Maybe all you need is a simple Kustomize, or maybe even a text-based YAML modification, right? Like you have a make file, make some changes. I think that's okay, just to get started. Or even, this is the lowest common denominator, right? Have 3 sets of manifests that you copy paste back and forth. I mean, I'm not suggesting you do that, but that's also
that's how you kind of get started, kind of learning like, oh, I can't keep you do that until you realize, oh, I can't keep doing that. But then you've matured to the level that you can maybe open up and use the other tools.
I think the trap of manifest languages with YAMLs and Kubernetes manifests and Terraform manifests is also manifest language. I think the trap there is really making variables out of things that don't need to be variables. And I see this over and over and over again. People will say like, oh, it's over parameterized. It's like, you don't need that. It's a manifest language. You can actually use what somebody called disparagingly magic strings. It's a manifest. It's supposed to have this data in it. So it's okay. And just think about I would say, think about the consumers, who's using this product, who needs to parameterize it, and only include the necessary parameters. And I think that will lend the answer.
Simplify it great. And the key there is like when you are building this open source, you'll naturally see it be parameterized to the nth degree, versus if it's for your company, really you only need to parameterize those things that vary, things like the image tag and maybe resource limits. But you don't need to parameterize just to parameterize. What you don't want to have to, like the config, the Kubernetes manifest, that is your config. It's already parameterized. It's parameterized for Kubernetes. You're just adding one extra layer of kind of parameterization on that to dry it up. Any Vlad maybe, or Matt Calhoun, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I don't know. First of all, how many environments are there gonna be? Like, does it make sense? Because at some point, everything you're doing with Helm chart is just copying the same YAML, but it's more complex YAML. If you're just introducing more complex YAML, does it make sense? Another thing I would consider is how much automation do you have around this? So with Helm, it's really nice to be able to just do Helm list and get nice versioning links and application names and all that. It's awesome. You can do rollbacks. Maybe not the best idea, but you can do rollbacks and things like that. But you've got to set up a Helm chart repository. It's not terribly complex. There's a way to do it on S3, that's pretty easy, but you have to do that, you have to secure that, you have to do a bunch of things. It might be easier to just have YAMLs copy pasted because that's easier, and you can do some interesting automations with GitHub Actions on that. You're not, I don't want to say limited, but you don't have to follow the same strict workflow of get the Helm chart and now do things and play with parameters. You can just directly modify the output. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. I know this is the kind of thing that depends wildly, and I'd love to have a general rule or a valid starting point. For this, there's not. And recently, Terraform is also getting not terrible with their Kubernetes providers.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I was going to say that this is also your other option. I think once you graduated from doing the raw manifest and you want to start looking at tools, well, don't rule out using Terraform. Maybe you're not going to use Terraform for your application deployments, but for the backing services inside of your Kubernetes cluster, like Cert Manager or external DNS or Reloader, or some of those are the common ones we deploy. Terraform is a great candidate for those. You know, last week we did talk about, I think it was last week, came up about or the week before that, some of the deployment patterns with Argo CD. And then somebody brought this to my attention, which is Argo CD Autopilot, which is under the Argo CD, Argo Project Labs organization. And I guess the primary sponsor behind this is CodeFresh. But this is not a CodeFresh centric solution or pattern. So I'm really curious to check this out, because it's the first kind of semi-official reference architecture for how to deploy and manage Argo CD. So check that out, and we'll share this link. I bring that up because of the tie-in here with how to deploy your apps ultimately with to Kubernetes, be it Helm or otherwise.
Yes, so I actually joined the company recently that the person who was there before was using customization, and I think it was kind of hard to manage it, especially because I came from a background where I was using more of Helm, and also having to go into each of those services one by one and then write my deployment file, all those files was really hard. So what I kind of always, because I've actually used Kubernetes for a bit, not that good, but I had to I always have a base Helm chart, that base Helm, that base that kind of contains everything. I think in everything I do, I kind of just want to have that base guide that kind of contains everything that is going to be used, that is redundant, that is always going to be used and all. Then I think I used 3 ways of doing it. I had a base Helm chart, and then I actually also introduced Helm files.
Yes. Yeah, Helm files, it's almost cruel of me not to mention Helm files. We are still a major user, and not we are a proponent of Helm file, but I see diminishing returns with Helm file now as the ecosystem has matured. So where we were 100% gung-ho on Helm file originally, as a Terraform shop, and with the advancement of the Terraform Helm provider, we see diminishing returns using Helm file if you're already using Terraform. But if you're not using Terraform, then Helm file is not a bad option.
I think Terraform is hard to use on Kubernetes. I feel it's too much. I don't want to use, my company currently uses Terraform to manage GitHub, and I'm like, what? No, I'm tired. I just want to use Terraform and just do the basic stuff I need to do, build my whole infrastructure. I don't want to use it for Helm file. I think for Helm. I think just leaving Helm to just be on its own for me is just easy. You're not putting everything together. To me, I think so though.
Yeah.
I don't.
What's nice about that is then you don't have to worry about the state management, and you can just run Helm file and whatnot.
You can even use it without Helm file. You could just use Helm without having to use Terraform and all. And then because I use GitLab, so I will just pass it through GitLab and then just use and GitLab has the ability to do almost everything.
So you actually bring up a really good point, because I don't think I emphasized this enough. So we talked about how, like, if you were writing all these raw manifests, it's going to get boring real quick because it's not very dry. So then you're going to need Kustomize or Helm to wrap that up. The funny thing is, then you start doing all this Helm, and then you learn that, you know, WTF, these values files are static. I can't have variables in there. What the heck were they thinking? So then you realize you need another abstraction on top of Helm. And that's why you have tools like Helm file, which let you define your entire application release across all of these diverse set of Helm charts that you might have.
Yeah,
And,
especially with multiple environments. Yeah.
Yeah. And much the same way you would use Helm file for that, an alternative to that is you can use Terraform. It's kind of just what fits with your, you know, worldview on how to deploy the Kubernetes, and there's no right or wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.